All right, so you finished your fun-filled exercise about those first two creation accounts in Genesis, and hopefully you've come up with some things that were different. So, for example, the name of the deity is different in the, what happened here? Sorry, I do apologize. I had this to the right spot, and then sadly, things went awry. But you've been through the exercise that I wanted you to go through at this point. And you probably noticed a couple of things. So number one, you likely noticed that the name of the deity is different in the first creation account than it is in the second creation account. In the first creation account, we've got Lord God. In the second one, we just have Lord. And then creation takes a different amount of time. In the first creation account, it takes 6 days, and God rests on the seventh. In the second creation account, it only takes 1 day. And you can look, and you can check me on that in Genesis 2:4. It says, in the day that the Lord created the heavens and the earth. And then this question, is the earth initially a wet or a dry place? In the first creation account, it is wet. And in the second creation account, it's dry, and water doesn't come up until later. What's the order of creation? Where does humanity rank in this order? Well, in the first creation account, humanity's last. In the second creation account, I think it's like third or something, and then animals come after it. I can't exactly remember. You just did the exercise. You tell me. I will read what you've done. And then who's created first, man or woman? In the first creation account, we have them created at the same time. God created male and female at the same time. In the second creation account, we've got man created first, and then God takes a rib out of man and creates a woman. Fun fact, growing up, I always heard that men have fewer ribs than women, and it had something to do with Genesis. I just always heard that, and I always believed it. It's actually not true. You should Google that. I don't think that it was just Christians that told me this stuff, but I always heard it. That's just a little side note. Sorry, I got on a rabbit trail. But you can see that these two creation accounts are different. And I asked you to think about whether or not they can both be historically accurate. Maybe you came up with a way that they can. Your friend, Carol, she would come up with a way that they could be completely historically accurate. I don't know how she does that, because you may have guessed by now that I kind of side with Steve. And I'm like, they were using different genres for different things, blah-de-blah. So come up with what you think about that stuff. Hey, maybe you are on the side of Bart, and you're like, oh my gosh, if it can't be completely factual, that it can't be true, which maybe Bart stands. But I wanted to alert you to these differences because, hey, you're probably going to hear them at some point in time, and so it's good to deal with them now while you're in an Old Testament class. But also, I want to introduce you to my friend. My friend is Julius Bellhausen, and you read about him in Banstra. Now, he loved the Bible. It was his favorite thing to do, to read the Bible all day long and just study it. And he noticed these differences within the two creation accounts and multiple differences throughout the Pentateuch. And he was like, my gosh, I wonder why these stories don't quite line up. Why, for example, in one place, it says that Noah brings on the ark 2 of every kind of animal, 1 male, 1 female. And in another place, it's like 7 of every kind of animal. I just don't know. Why is this happening? So why are there these discrepancies? And as he went through, he noticed something. And he came up with this idea called the documentary hypothesis, where he said maybe, just maybe, somebody was sitting down during the exile and they were trying to get that thing, that firm Torah that they could hold on to because they didn't have a temple any longer. And what they did as they were sitting there was they took, I'm just going to take, for instance, that person sitting there in the exile was like, we as the people of God need something firm to hold on to. And so they had at their disposal, according to Bellhausen, 4 different sources. 1, 2, whoa, I lost the second one. 2, 3, and 4. They had 4 different writings of the stories that are present throughout the Torah. And what they did was they took them all and they scooshed them together into one. So they took each one of these different sources, and there are 4 of them. There's the Yahwist source, there's the Elohist source, there's the priestly source, and there's the Deuteronomic source. Those are the 4 sources that, as Wellhausen was working through, he said, okay, he like took his Bible, and you could say that he like color coded it. And he was like, okay, so here's all of the stuff that seems kind of priestly. And then the priestly stuff picks up again here. And then over here, this is kind of Yahwistic. So in the priestly stuff, they call Yahweh Elohim. And in the Yahwistic stuff, they call Yahweh Yahweh. So, man, what do we do with all of this? So what he said was somebody sat down during the exile, took these 4 sources, the Yahwist, the Elohist, the priestly, and the Deuteronomic, sorry, I should do 4 that way, and put them all together and kind of like put a little piece here, little piece there, and piecemeal put the whole thing together. Now, I don't know if Wellhausen's right or not. Most people today are like, yeah, he was onto something, but he didn't have it exactly right. However, what most people will say today is that these 2 sources, the Yahwist and the priestly, are a pretty good start to something. And so when you look at your 2 creation accounts, when you look at the first creation account, you're going to notice that Yahweh is majestic. Yahweh is up above everything. Yahweh is lurking up here. Yahweh is like a God that went to the container store. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but you can get tons of Tupperware, and was like, okay, I am going to take the sun and put it here, and I'm going to take the land and put it here, and then in where the sun is, I'm going to call that day, and where the land is, I'm going to put animals, that sort of thing. Yahweh is super organized in the first creation account. And so usually scholars will say that the first creation account is priestly because Yahweh is majestic, up above things. Yahweh speaks and it happens. And then in the second creation account, Yahweh is more down and dirty. You may have noticed that Yahweh is down playing in the dirt, forming a human and then breathing into it. I mean, that's pretty wild. In that first creation account, you get none of that. Yahweh is just talking and things are happening. In the second creation account, Yahweh has his hands in the dirt and then breathes into Adam. So we've got in here anthropomorphic, meaning God has human-like characteristics. Anthropomorphic speech about God. God is down and dirty and with us. And then Yahweh reaches in and pulls out Adam's rib. So you've got God that is down and dirty in the second creation account, and a God that is majestic and high above everything in the first creation account. And that's what Wellhausen would have pointed to say, gosh, it seems like these are 2 different sources. That's what I want you to know. I want you to keep in mind that the first creation account is priestly. Yahweh is high and majestic. And the second creation account, Yahweh is anthropomorphic. Yahweh is down in the dirt. And so, hey, there's something to Wellhausen's idea about how the Pentateuch came together. It may not be 4 sources, and the sources may not have actually been documents like he suggested. They may have been oral traditions that were brought together. I don't know how exactly it happened. Remember, we're in the world behind the text right now, and that's sometimes kind of hard to figure out. But somehow all of this came together, and we do have 2 separate creation accounts. So that's going to be important for you. So now you know part of where some people think the Pentateuch came from. We're going to switch gears at this point, and we're going to talk about that first creation account. So the first creation account, I've already suggested to you that maybe, just maybe, the genre is not historical. And so what I'm going to suggest to you now is that the genre of that first creation account, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep, all of that stuff. I'm going to suggest to you that it's more like a hymn than it is like an historical account. So a couple of things that you're going to notice that you may have noticed reading through it, it's really repetitive. And the third day, God did this, and God saw that it was good. And on the fourth day, God did this, and God saw that it was good. And there's this certain repetition and cadence to it, and it kind of sets you up to sing it or chant it, or it's a little bit more poetic than it is necessarily historical. That's where I'm going with the genre here. I don't think that this was meant to be taken as an historical text, though many have taken it as historical, and many will say the earth was created in 6 days. I'm going to say I don't think that's what the text is saying. Maybe the earth was created in 6 days. I don't know because I wasn't there, but I think that this text is leading us in a slightly different direction. So another thing that you're going to notice on top of the repetition and the cadence that we have in this first creation account is that these 6 days are broken into days of forming and days of filling. And so like I mentioned to you, God is very organized in this first creation account. God creates in the first 3 days spaces. So God creates a light space and a dark space. And on the 4th day, God fills the light space with the sun and the dark space with the moon and the stars. So a day of forming and a day of filling. On the 2nd day, God creates the sea and the sky. So God creates these areas. And then on the 5th day, God fills the areas, fills the sea and fills the sky. On the 3rd day, God creates land and plants. And so we've got this kind of canvas, kind of Bob Ross type canvas with happy little trees. And then on the 6th day, God fills that canvas that's got land and trees with animals that live on the land and humans. So cows and people and stuff like that. So you can see how organized this God is. It's as if he's gone and he's gotten color-coded Tupperware in this first one for light, one for dark, one for sea, one for sky, one for the things that will go on the land. And in the second 4 days, God fills each one of those. So the repetition, the cadence, and the structure of it indicates to me that the first creation account that seems to indicate, at least to historical readers, that God created the earth in 6 days is not necessarily saying that. Rather, it's trying to communicate God is an organized God, and God has created spheres for certain things to exist in. There's a sphere of light, there's a sphere of dark, there's a sky, there's a sea, and there's land, and each thing belongs to each one of these categories. So that's what I think is going on in Genesis chapter 1. You can take it or leave it. If you want to continue to believe that God created the earth in 6 days, exactly like it says, I'm going to say to you that you are very similar to Carol, which is a legitimate place to be. However, I disagree, and you don't have to agree with me in this course. Oh no, I lost Steve. Okay, and I'm going to go with Steve, and I'm going to say that's not necessarily what this text is saying. Rather, this is more of a hymn or a poem to the greatness of God in creating all that there is. All right, so take a breather, and we will be right back with more information about the world behind the text.